Well, it's no secret that the state of Alabama, specifically in its inner cities, struggles with insane amounts of violent crime. What can be done in the legislature to fix that or give support to those who can fix it? Well, we're bringing on State Senator Will Barfoot to talk about exactly that, as well as DEI and divisive concepts. And I want to hear from him on what he thinks about the potential of a Governor Tuberville. We have an incredible culture here in the state of Alabama, but our politics and public policy don't reflect the people of Alabama. Media drives culture. Culture is what drives politics and public policy. Welcome, everyone, to 1819 News, the podcast. I'm Bryan Dawson, CEO of 1819 News and host of this here podcast, where we are in pursuit of a free and flourishing Alabama every single week. Continuing on with our effort to reach out to people who are actually doing the work in state government and who are doing a pretty good job. I'm obviously hypercritical of so much in our state government. It's why I created 1819 News, to bring accountability to the state. And there's people in Montgomery that appreciate it, and there's people in Montgomery that don't. And I think the people I'm bringing on are the ones that appreciate it, but we'll see. Really, after watching Ted Cruz and Tucker Carlson, maybe I should bring on some people that had more adversarial interviews. I don't know. That was a ton of fun. But we can mix it up. Yeah, we can mix it up. Bringing on State Senator Will Barfoot. He is my senator, actually, in Senate District 25, which I'll have him tell a little bit about where that is as we jump in. Bringing him on, we're going to talk anti-gang legislation, DEI and divisive concepts, public safety and policing, his thoughts on Tuberville for governor, and if you're a paying member, we're going to do an overtime segment on, is this World War III or just good peace through strength, Reagan foreign policy? We'll dive into that conversation. But before we do, I want to tell you guys, it's you who make this recording possible, these podcasts possible, our newsletter, our website, our everything we do at 1819 News is made possible through the financial support of our readers. That is how we operate, and that is who we work for, is our readers. That is the difference between us and every other news outlet in the state. We are not funded by corporations. We're not funded by the Alabama Department of Mental Health or the Alabama Department of Public Health or the Alabama Department of Transportation. I mean, go on and on of all the things that we've been able to uncover and show how these state agencies are giving money to media outlets for favorable coverage, as well as massive corporations and lobbying groups. It's always there, but we take money from the people, so therefore we work for you. And so please help us get to a point of sustainability. We grow each and every week by going to the website at the top, 1819news.com. There's a button that says become a member. Click that button, become a member today, get access to behind the scenes content like I'm going to be recording with Senator Will Barfoot today. You get cool merch, but more than anything, you get to be the citizen and citizen supported journalism. So please go do that. All right. Senator Will Barfoot, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Glad to be here. Appreciate the opportunity. My first time on a podcast, so I'm really excited.
Man, there's a couple of guys that's been the case. I know it's probably not a big surprise that I was Larry Studd's first podcast. He's kind of old, but yeah, no, that's been good. I've been able to get some guys on their first podcast, and pretty soon you guys are all going to have home studios because it's getting cheaper and cheaper, and you just have a home studio and jump on and do them. But So, Senator Barfoot, you are Senate District 25. Obviously, that is I live in Wetumpka. But where are your lines? Who do you cover? Whereabouts?
Yeah, so District 25 is all of Crenshaw County, about 3/4 of Montgomery County geographically, and then pretty close to 3/4 of Elmore County. I split Montgomery County with Senator Hatcher, and then in Elmore County, Senator Chambliss has a significant portion of Elmore County as well.
Okay. And how long have you been in the Senate?
Was elected in 2018, was my first term, ran again in 2022.
Okay. Question I ask everybody that comes down, just a little bit about yourself, where you were born, your parents, how where you were born and your parents kind of influenced what you decided to do in life, and how did you get into politics?
Great question. I grew up in Montgomery County, Pike Road. Pike Road now everybody knows or thinks of Pike Road as this bustling, happening place. But in the mid to late 70s, whenever I was a kid, Pike Road was just a farming community, a little town, an afterthought in Montgomery County. Of course, that's changed a lot since then. My daddy was a policeman, and he also farmed, and my mama was a teacher. And I hope I got some of the better attributes that they have. I'm not sure that that's true. I'm not half the man my daddy is, but my love of politics probably comes more from my mama. She was a history teacher. I loved history. I loved politics. Even as a young kid, I can remember, watching the 1980 election night, general election between Carter and Reagan, and I can remember the Reagan-Mondale debates and in the '84 election. And as a kid, that seems a little odd looking back on it now, but I really enjoyed that. I mean, again, I always thought history, politics, and then ultimately practicing law kind of goes hand in hand. And then, like I said, my daddy was a policeman, and he had two brothers, or has two brothers, and all of them were in law enforcement, and all of them farmed. So, grew up in Pike Road. My first job was in sixth grade. I'd get off the school bus every day, little grocery store, what I call a country grocery store. You could buy axe handles or hoop cheese or overalls or kerosene, didn't matter, souse meat. And I'd work every day after school until closing time for about 3 hours a day, and then half a day on Saturday. So was a wonderful life. It was a magical time and a magical place, and I'm very blessed to have the family and grow up in Pike Road when I did.
That's awesome. Well, you got a lot of good stuff going on, it looks like, in the Senate, and it's interesting. I had Senator Lance Bell was on right previous to you, and your guys' stories have some overlap there. He was telling me his story of kind of farming community, wake up and feed horses. The next thing you know, you're wrestling PCP suspects when he was in law enforcement. So it is an interesting thread. I'm someone who pays attention to patterns of the people who make it to Montgomery. There are, like, you hit a lot of the nails. Like, there's family that was in law enforcement, family that was a teacher. Right, so those are two professions, right? That obviously what happens in Montgomery really has a big impact on them. And what I see in a lot of the things that you're trying to work to get done in Montgomery reflect that. And so I think that's really great. And specifically the anti-gang legislation. Talk a little bit about how that came about, where it is. Do we need to do more?
Yeah. So the anti-gang legislation was in the 2024 session, and we've already seen that being put into use. I think there's a case up in Tuscaloosa that just made the news where there were multiple individuals who were indicted based on the underlying crimes, but also used that gang activity, sets parameters of what is gang-related activity. Just because somebody goes and commits a crime doesn't mean they're a gang member, but there are 6 or 7 different qualifiers that if they meet a couple of those qualifiers, then they can be having a heightened, enhanced punishment for their activity and the underlying crime. There's a piece of legislation, quite honestly, that originated from the Attorney General's office, General Marshall and Catherine Robertson, his chief of staff. And they do a great job of working with the House and the Senate, and letting us know some tools that law enforcement may need in order to combat the violent criminals that we have out there. So we're very glad to work with them on that. You might remember this past session, we also had a speedy trial bill that just got passed. That was also worked very closely with General Marshall and with Catherine Robertson at his office. And that speedy trial legislation allowed either the DA or the Attorney General to ask the Chief Justice for another judge to come in that circuit and try cases. In Montgomery, we've got probably, last I heard, somewhere around 300 murder cases that are still pending. And boy, it's tough whenever you're a victim and you have, it's been 5 and 6 years and the case is still not resolved. So hopefully that'll break some of that logjam that's there.
I would like to see a speedy execution bill.
Yeah, well, right. It's funny. You're right about that. I mean, of course, I am. As an attorney, I recognize the constitutional rights that we have, and the need to protect those. But I don't know why it takes 20 and 30 years to make sure that process works. So I think you're right from the standpoint of there's we've got to protect those constitutional rights that everybody has. But at the same time, I don't know why it takes so long.
Yeah, no, and just biblically speaking, I am neither a lawyer or a theologian, but I just have a podcast and opine on everything as though that's exactly what I am. So here's my opinion on theologically speaking. The Bible says that the state does not bear the sword in vain, right? And it's supposed to punish the evildoer. We have a huge problem in Montgomery and Birmingham in Alabama that a lot of other states don't face. Really specifically, that throughout the Bible Belt, southern states. With this kind of, metro, city, whatever you want to call it, the crime that we face, but it's every crime is everywhere, specifically murder, all this other stuff. This is not new. And when you think about like the Wild West and all the stuff that happened when we were pioneering and going out West, man, they just hung those people in a tree, and you know what? It became civilized real quick. And how again, tying that theologically to the state bearing the power of the sword, you can't expect everybody in society to be a Christian and go to church and honor God and follow all the laws. And that's fine. But when people step outside of that in a severe way that we would consider capital punishment, the swifty execution puts the fear of God before the eyes of a citizenry, right? And when the people see, oh, wow, that is a very severe consequence for a very severe crime, it does something. But like you said, when it takes 20 years, 30 years to do it, it doesn't have the same effect. And so, anyway, on my wish list of legend, it's weird. People, because of my background, people think like, well, why would you be advocating that? It's like, because I've seen this stuff firsthand and see how it works. So either way, glad though the anti-gang legislation, that is a big problem. We are in the Montgomery area. We're seeing it. There was did you see that documentary that was on YouTube and then like WSFA had YouTube take it down? Did you get a chance to watch that?
I did, and here's the sad part. None of that surprised me. To some people, when they saw it, they're like, "Oh my gosh, that's going on here," and I go, "Yeah, I mean, I thought everybody knew that."
Yep.
It's unfortunate, that's for sure. That's putting it mildly.
Yeah, and I wish they wouldn't have taken it down, because I do think it is good for everyone to really understand what our law enforcement in Montgomery County is up against, what Attorney General Steve Marshall is up against, what Hal Taylor's up against, what you guys are trying to deal with in the legislature, while protecting constitutional rights, whether that be Second Amendment or speedy trial or whatever, protecting those while also protecting the citizens. I think you guys do a good job of trying to thread the needle, but it's tough. DEI and divisive concepts, that's obviously a huge thing in this weird world where, I guess the DEI standpoint of the affirmative action stuff, that's been around since the civil rights era, is now really what I think the civil rights were trying to rectify something that was bad and make it good. Now, 50 years later has turned into just flat out anti-white racism is basically what it is. And then divisive concepts, you start getting into the sexual perversion and things that they're trying to foist upon our children in schools and stuff like that. I know that is an area that you're working on. Talk a little bit about what you're doing in those areas.
Sure. I want to give a lot of credit on this one, too, for Representative Ed Oliver. Going back several years, Ed and I had worked together on the divisive concepts, anti-DEI legislation. Ed was really the tip of the spear on that, and we passed it out of the House a couple different years. Finally got it through the Senate. I believe it would have been 2 sessions ago. And, what that legislation to me was very common sense. It was that we shouldn't be teaching our young people, our children, that because you're a certain race or gender, that you're any less than somebody else, or that you should feel like that you shoulder any blame for any past historical events. And the truth of the matter is, we got beat up and said, well, you don't want to teach history. And I said, no, quite the contrary. I think we should teach it all, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But I don't think that, and there's plenty of all of it to go around, right? But I don't think that we should ostracize or alienate any child, indoctrinate them from the standpoint that, because they're a certain race or because they're a certain religion, that they're less than their peers. And unfortunately, that was being done. We're given preferential treatment, and the Supreme Court addressed that in a case involving the University of North Carolina, I believe Harvard also. it was amazing to me that the number of people who pushed back on that, and I thought it was very common sense. And I asked a couple of those folks, I said, "Have you?" This is outside the legislative arena, but I said, have you read it?" "No, I haven't read it. And I've seen something on the news about it." And I said, "Well, I'm going to send you a copy of it." And I'd send them a copy, email them a copy of it. And I said, "Now you point out to me what you don't agree with in there." And every one of them, after they read it, said to me, "Gosh, I didn't realize that. That seems like common sense." And I said, "It does, doesn't it?" So it's hopefully we've been able to make some headway at the state level. And of course, that's been a national issue, one that President Trump has been pushing for even from his first term. So I think you've seen some changes in that, and hopefully they'll hold steady.
Yeah, 100%. And the nature of these things, whether it's Common Core or it's DEI or whatever, we can come out and issue legislation. And I think a lot of times when we try, and again, I mean, that's your legislator, that's what you do. The legislation can accomplish a lot, but at the end of the day, as conservatives, we are up against people who do not follow the law and don't have a respect for the rule of law and don't the spirit, the letter, any of the law. They have no respect for any of it. And so we will pass legislation that is good, common sense legislation like you're talking about. And then all of a sudden at the University of Alabama or the university, just insert whatever university here. I don't want to pick on any of the universities unnecessarily. It will go from, the Office of, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion to the Office of Multiculturalism now. Same staff, same objectives, but it is now no longer the DEI office. It is the Multiculturalism office. Have you seen this? Is there anything we can do to kind of try and, feels like we're trying to nail Jello to the wall?
Yeah, well, I'll say this, and not just with that legislation, but what I've become keenly aware as I've gotten older, and is that you can have all the ink and all the paper in the world, and you can craft the best legislation, but ultimately, if you don't have those enforcing it,
Yep.
Then you have a problem. And even deeper than that, quite honestly, it's a problem of the heart.
Yep.
And we can't control that. The legislature can't control that. Quite honestly, the only one who can change that is Holy Spirit working on somebody.
Yeah.
And I used to say, if you looked in the court system, on the criminal side of the equation, I used to say, man, if we could just do away with drugs, that's the problem. Well, that's a symptom of the problem. And then I thought, well, really it's not drugs, it is the breakdown of the family. And that's a major issue, but that's still not the problem. That is a symptom of the problem. The problem is a heart issue.
Yep.
And unfortunately, we can't do anything about that. But we try from the legislative side of the equation to craft laws that those in the executive branch and law enforcement, the DA's office, can use as a tool to hopefully serve as a deterrent.
Sure. No, and I definitely commend you on both the anti-gang legislation and the DEI stuff. I think it's great. The divisive concepts, you and Representative Ed Oliver, I think those are great. And we are in for a constant fight. The people that we're up against are never going to stop. They are, even with Donald Trump winning the election, him getting all of his cabinet picks, everything, it never ends. And there's something almost supernatural about their resistance, almost though it's like, I mean, I sound like a quack, but it's spiritual warfare. It really is. You talked about, it's a heart problem. You're exactly right. And we're up against, spiritual forces of darkness that seem to never relent. And we just want to, the Grill Americans thing, right? We just want to love our wives, raise our kids, cook out, go on vacation, and they won't leave us alone. Frustrating.
Well, that seems to be the playbook of the left. For years it was, don't be such a bigot or don't be so anti this. Let me just live my own life.
Yeah.
And then it changed to, well, you need to accept it. We're not forcing it on you, but you should accept it.
Yeah.
And then it became gradually along the way, it became, if you don't not only accept this, but endorse this, then we are going to, just pound you to death. And unfortunately, that's the world that we're living in. If you, before my time, but even, going back to the 40s and 50s, if you'd have said, here's the world that we're living in now, they would have been astonished. Heck, I'm 53 years old. And, things have changed so rapidly just in the past 20 years.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid for our children where we're going to be in another 20 years.
Yep, that's it. That is the reason I fight, is exactly what you just said. The future of my children, my children's children, trying to do everything I can every single day to leave it better, or at least not as bad as it could be. But yeah, it is. I think that's really interesting. It's like, hey, we just want to be left alone to, hey, you should acknowledge, the legitimacy of what we're doing. And as a matter of fact, actually, you need to endorse it and give it your full-throated support. And if you don't, you're a bigot, and we're going to make sure that you can never work anywhere again. And it's crazy. I always tell people that, the ideology that we're up against, I would call it communism, Marxism, woke mind virus, whatever you want to call it. It's all the same, is, it's antichrist. And then people specifically in the South, they're like, antichrist, are you talking about the rapture and tribulation? No, calm down. What I mean when I say antichrist is that this ideology that we're up against is literally antithetical to the Christian faith. And so you have whatever God says is good, these people that we're up against say it's bad, and whatever God says is bad, these people will put in a parade in front of your children, right? Like, that's what we're up against. Yep. And it's wild.
If you'd several this past year, there was the "What is a Woman" bill.
Yeah.
And if you would have told anybody 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that the legislature in Alabama is going to be spending time defining what is a man or a woman, they'd have probably thrown every one of them out.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we need that now.
Yeah.
I mean, it is absolutely crazy. Bill, a couple of years ago, girls can't, boys can't play in girls' sports. That's an oversimplification of what the bill did. But again, 15 years ago, you'd have thought, who are these people that we sent down there? They're spending time, energy, and effort on something like this, but it's something that unfortunately we have to tackle and have to deal with.
Yeah, 100%. And another thing is, it has been really good for me to bring you guys, like, all the different legislators that I would identify as people who are good people doing good work down there. The things that I hear with some, whether, Susan DuBose on the What is a Woman, Larry Stutz and Lance and everybody, the craziest thing to me is hearing about the pushback that you guys experience, like you said, with common sense legislation. I forget who it was, if it was the medical age of consent, that is, in everything, whether you want to smoke a cigarette, whether you want to drink a beer, whether you want to buy a gun, whether you want to, like, join the military, like, it's always the same. Like, the parents are in charge until 19 in the state of Alabama or whatever, right? But it's like, but if you want to cut your penis off, 14, what? Right? Yeah. It's unbelievable. But then medical age of consent, that actually covers a lot more. It's obviously coming and stemming from the transgender stuff, but that covers a lot more stuff. And then it was a full out warfare to get it from 14 to 16. And the people that were pushing back against it are a bunch of doctors who are saying, we've got to get the parents out of the decision making. We've got to get the parents out of the decision making. And it's just like, is this real?
Yeah. So we have 5 children, and you ask any of them, something similar to this type of a statement, I've ingrained it in them. Until you're an adult, or until you're off of the payroll, whichever comes first.
Yeah.
Your mama and I are going to be making decisions for you. Yeah. And I've also used to mess with them, although it's actually legally true too. I said, there's not a thing in the world that you own, and there's not a thing that you own this whole entire world until you become an adult. And so from that standpoint, the legislation to me should have been 18 years old.
Yeah.
I understand that there were some practical pushbacks that I completely understand. Little Johnny gets sick, and on the way home from school, and Mama tells him to go by, doctor's office. I think we could have crafted some language that would have gotten around that. But children should not be allowed to make their own medical decisions, and that's just the case. And we are responsible for we as parents are responsible for our children.
Yep.
And sometimes, that's a good thing. Sometimes it's as a parent, that's a difficult thing, but it's a responsibility that we have when we have children.
That's right.
I certainly think that that increased age should have been to 18, but I'm glad we at least got it moved from 14 to 16.
Yep.
So
100%. Yeah, I could ramble on and on about this, but I think it is important because 5 years ago, like, there was a bunch of people with their hair on fire, me included, coming out and basically saying, hey, they're trying to steal your children. They're trying to steal our children. And everyone's like, you're crazy. No one's trying to steal your children. It's like, obviously, I'm not saying they're trying to physically steal them. What I'm saying is they're trying to steal the hearts, minds, and souls of the next generation. And you see it encroaching everywhere. And how I believe they've been able to do it is you've got I have no idea what the numbers are, but let's just say 20%. So all the parents and all the children in the state of Alabama, 20% of the parents are unfit, derelict, whatever you want to call them. And they are the exception. The rule is that for the most part, parents take, some better than others, but for the most part, we'll say 70, 80% of the parents take responsibility for their children in a way that is, considered good enough. But then that other 20% that is derelict and incompetent, that is who these doctors are pointing at. That is who these counselors are pointing at. That is who the schools are pointing at. And then they want us to make legislation and laws and rules based off of those 20% that the other 80% have to abide by, right? Like me, who is a responsible parent, now I have to, because there's, some kid or some parent did this awful thing. We're going to make it all boils down to we're making rules based on exceptions rather than making exceptions to rules.
Yeah, and you're talking about that. You left one out. The indoctrination of kids also happens on social media. It happens on TV.
Yep.
We have 3 grandchildren, and when I was a kid, when Mom and Daddy let you watch TV, we had 5 channels. I think they turned on PBS, and PBS was the Muppets or Sesame Street. Now you've got to be diligent to figure out these hidden messages. When I say hidden messages, some of them are not really hidden. Sally's got 2 mamas, and you've got a 6-year-old watching a cartoon about that. Why? What's the point other than to try to normalize it and indoctrinate the kids?
Yep, 100%. And I've got 7 children, and same thing. We don't do a lot of TV in our house, but we'll go on vacation and stay with my aunt and uncle who never had kids. And they'll just put the kids down and turn on Nickelodeon, and everything is gay, everything is trans, everything is and it's not even subtle anymore. If you're running a ministry or you own a business, my guess is that you've been thinking about starting a podcast for a while now, but for various reasons it hasn't happened yet. Send me an email. I need to personally connect you with Yonder Child Media. They built this studio in 2 days and tackle all of the production. I just come in, start talking, and leave. It's that easy. They do everything else. Whether you want to record at your business or a home office like they just built for me, you come in, start talking, and Yonder Child will do everything else. Send me an email. That's going to be BRYAN, Bryan.Dawson, DAWSON at 1819news.com, and I'd be happy to personally connect you. Public safety and policing, obviously you talked about with your father being in law enforcement and your uncles. Specifically in Montgomery, Birmingham, and Pritchard, those being the big areas here. Talk about what you're doing there.
Yeah, so the Montgomery, I call it Montgomery, the Metro Area Crime Suppression Unit that was formed, MAC, that's right, was formed 2 years ago. We've funded that, and hopefully ALEA and other organizations, law enforcement agencies around the state will be able to use that. Of course, it's been somewhat effective here in Montgomery. Hats off to the Attorney General's office, to ALEA, to Sheriff Cunningham's done a great job, Montgomery. And, the issue that I see is, in law enforcement now, it's always been true. You wake up in the morning and you put on the badge and you know that you might not come home. That was true 150 years ago, true a long time ago. The problem is that at least until recent memory, we, the public, the government entity that was controlled that law enforcement agency, supported law enforcement. Unfortunately, you see a lot of times now that law enforcement officers are the ones who've been vilified in the media, on social media. They've been drugged through the mud. Doxing happens, and I don't know why anybody in their right mind. There's certain agencies, law enforcement agencies throughout the state, that I think, gosh, I would never want to go work there. And until we change that, there's until we change that, I think that the horizon is very dim. And I think we've certainly tried to do that. Senator Bell had the Back the Blue bill, him and Chairman Reynolds, Representative Reynolds, and I think I'm hopeful that that's going to be a big help. That law enforcement will realize that when you have to make a split-second decision, there's a law and on the books that will allow at least the facts to be looked at prior to going through the whole legal system. So
yeah, you would think in a place like Alabama that wouldn't be as big of an issue, but it is, man. There's nowhere where this stuff hasn't touched. It's obviously not as bad here as it is other places. I forget. I want to say it was in Decatur. I can't remember where it was, but there was an officer. So basically, I'm sure you remember this case, but there was a guy that was trying to repo a vehicle. He went to repo the vehicle. Guy comes out with a pistol, waving the pistol. He runs. He calls the cops. The cops come to support him to go repo the vehicle. And the guy comes out with a pistol again. And, we can see clearly in the body cam footage that the flashlight on the pistol hit the cop's face, and then the cop, fired and killed him. The problem is the only thing that was being admitted into courts through that district attorney was the ring cam footage that looked like it was edited, and it made it look like, he was just shot in cold blood. Well, somehow the body cam footage found its way out, and we obviously got a hold of it and published it. In a sane world, that body cam footage would have just exonerated him and it would have been dropped, but it's still going on. But hopefully, by us running that story, he at least has a chance to defend himself with exactly what you're talking about. Give these guys a chance, to defend themselves.
I'm all for personal responsibility. The word immunity that's been used in that bill, I don't like immunity, because immunity means you can do something wrong and not be held accountable. Yeah. I'm not for immunity, but what I am for in law enforcement and other areas that we deal with throughout life, by the way, is holding people responsible for their actions, but also at the same time, making sure that there is a specific set of rules that they know and understand and that they can follow. And it's common sense rules. Yeah. You and I, as a Monday morning quarterback, can sit and look and say, well, they should have done this or they should have done that. But when you're out there on the streets as a law enforcement officer, again, never have served in that capacity, but when you're out there on the streets and you have those split-second decisions, and by the way, you're not going to prayer service. These things don't happen at a prayer service typically. And they're happening in bad areas of town or high crime areas of town at all hours of the night. And you've been subjected to, all kinds of things throughout your career, and you've seen things that other people haven't. And you're put in those situations where, if you're not right 100% of the time, you could wind up dead.
Yep.
And it's showing them a little grace. Again, we should hold those that violate the law and flaunt the law accountable. I'm not saying even if they're in law enforcement.
Sure.
But we've got to make sure that we give men and women who serve in that capacity that they know that we're not against them, that we're trying to craft legislation that hopefully they will understand and be able to act accordingly and reasonably in doing their jobs.
Yep, 100%. If you don't have that, you don't have a society. If you don't have law and order, right? And so, and just the Montgomery thing, I live here. I live in Wetumpka, and it's crazy. So that I'm sure these folks as do we, but I think her name was Amy Dix that was shot on Atlanta Highway where the bullet ripped through her car, and she's now paralyzed. My wife with my 7 children was in that Dillard's parking lot like an hour before that happened.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just like, what in the world? And under Stephen Reed, because there is crime in Montgomery, but it was prior to Stephen Reed, it was at least managed. Like you could go into Cloverdale and not get shot. Now you can't, right? Like they at least kept it at bay to where it was certain areas, and there was turf wars, and those turf wars were limited to certain areas or whatever. Couldn't completely get rid of it, but you were at least able to have some semblance of I can go here at this time and not worry, like, 2 in the afternoon on Atlanta Highway and not get paralyzed from a stray bullet. But that's not the case. Now I will say, once Max came in, I always call it the Montgomery area, but yeah, Metro Area Crime Suppression Unit. Once that happened, it has gotten a whole lot better. So kudos to Steve Marshall and Hal Taylor and everybody involved in that.
But here's the thing about that, Brian. If you take your foot off the gas there, it doesn't take long to revert back to where it was. So,
yep.
I've had multiple conversations with folks in law enforcement in the Montgomery area, and until there is leadership at the local level that's allowed to do what they need to do, i.e., really policing.
Yeah.
I don't know that you're going to see a change. So
yeah, thinking about Stephen Reed's his election party the night before the election, he had a bunch of rappers that were rapping about shooting people at his election party. It's like, I don't have a lot of hope that things are going to change here. So pretty wild. All right, well, let's wrap it up, at least for the normal portion of the podcast, and we'll go to overtime. But big news. I know you being in the Senate are probably very close with Lieutenant Governor Will Ainsworth. Consider him to be a good friend, think the world of him. In my mind, for the last 5 years, that was our next governor. Like, that was just what it was going to be. And then Tuberville announced that he's putting his hat in the ring. I think that kind of sent shockwaves. Now that the dust has kind of settled, Ainsworth is on board and has now endorsed Tuberville. I think it is. I think it is. It's very, very exciting. Tuberville's obviously, what he's been able to do in D.C., the war that he waged against Biden's Department of Defense for, funding women to go kill their children in other states when they were restricted from it in their home state. He's just done amazing stuff. He's an amazing guy. What are your thoughts on Governor Tuberville?
Well, I certainly think he's the lead, and look forward to being able to serve with him. I will tell you, it's a glass half full and glass half empty at the same time. I'm going to hate losing him in Washington.
Yep.
And that's just the truth of it. But he'll be able to bring some of that common sense approach here to Alabama. Look forward to being able to serve with him, and obviously I think he is the front runner, and I'd be surprised if he were not the Republican nominee, and by that I'd be surprised if he's not the next governor of the state of Alabama. And guess what? I think he's going to make a great governor.
Awesome. I agree with you completely on that. And anything else you want to add, Senator, before we wrap it up?
No, just appreciate you having us on, having me on. I did know that Senator Bell was on a week or so ago. Hadn't had a chance to watch that, so I'm looking forward to going back and critiquing him. I know he's going to critique me.
Well, good stuff. Well, I really do appreciate you guys. I mean, it's there's probably no one more critical than of what's going on in Montgomery than me, and with specific individuals. A lot of times, though, my sights are going to be set on leadership, even if I like the leadership, because that's where the responsibility lies. But I think it is the man in the arena is something that now that I'm running an organization and I've got lots of people working for me and we're making impact and I guess, in a sense, swaying influence or power, whatever you want to call it. I have people who are constantly ridiculing me and criticizing me. And so I get it. And there really is that man in the arena. You know what I'm talking about? The Roosevelt poem or thing that he wrote, The Man in the Arena. That's it. And so I know that you guys are down there. You're working hard to do the best you can. It's there's so much resistance to doing common sense things in your position. So stay at it, keep going. And hopefully, I guess we have one last year. How about this? Predictions for the next legislative session? It'll be an election year, right?
Yeah.
And so do you think anything crazy will happen, or what are your thoughts on that? And then we can end.
So, I guess depending on the lens you look through, every session there's something crazy.
Yeah, it's true.
So,
Fair.
I suspect, yes, crazy stuff, but it just depends on if it's crazy compared to other sessions. My hope is that we can get in there and do what we need to do, do the work that the people elected us to do and get out. I mean, I'm a firm believer, I was before and still am now, that sometimes the least the government does for you, the better off you are. President
Amen.
Reagan said, what is it? Is it 9 words, the 9 scariest words in the English language? I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
Yep.
And so maybe we can do what just the necessities of what we need to do, address the topics that we need to address, and then get out.
Amen. Awesome. Well, Senator Will Barfoot, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, sir.
All right, guys, that'll wrap it up for this week. We are now jumping into an overtime segment for those of you who are paying members of 1819 News. We're going to be talking Iran, bombs, World War III, peace through strength. Yes, he is a state senator and I am a state news agency, if you want to call it that. But why not? It's what's happening, and so we're going to talk current events on that coming up. But until next time, put your trust in God and keep your powder dry.